The smell of fresh donuts always made my mouth water. I'd been working at the shop for a few months now, and I still couldn't resist sneaking a bite of a warm glazed donut every now and then. The shop was small, with a counter in front and a kitchen in the back. The owner, Mr. Jenkins, was a kind old man who always had a smile on his face. He'd been running the shop for as long as anyone could remember. It was a quiet night, and I was wiping down the counter when the bell above the door chimed. I looked up to see a man in a dark coat and hat standing in the doorway. He had a creepy smile on his face, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. "Welcome to the donut shop," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "What can I get for you?" The man didn't answer. He just stared at me with those dark, piercing eyes. I felt my heart start to race as he slowly walked towards the counter. "Sir, is everything okay?" I asked, my voice trembling. He still didn't say anything. He just kept walking towards me, his smile growing wider and more sinister. I backed away, my hands shaking. "Please, I'm just trying to do my job," I pleaded. The man started to laugh, a chilling, high-pitched laugh that echoed through the small shop. I felt like I was going to pass out. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out. I screamed and tried to run, but the man grabbed me from behind. I could feel his breath on my neck, and I started to cry. "Please, let me go," I sobbed. The man just laughed again and tightened his grip. I tried to struggle, but he was too strong. I could feel myself getting weaker and weaker, and my vision blurring. And then, everything went black. When I woke up, I was lying on the floor of the shop. The lights were back on, and Mr. Jenkins was standing over me, a worried look on his face. "Are you okay? What happened?" he asked. I tried to tell him about the man, but he just shook his head. "There was no one here," he said. "You must have fallen asleep." I knew that wasn't true. I had seen the man, I had felt his grip on me, but Mr. Jenkins wouldn't listen. I quit my job at the donut shop the next day. I couldn't bear to be there anymore, not after what had happened. I never found out who that man was, or why he had come to the shop that night. But I knew one thing for sure. I never wanted to see him again. My name is Alex, and I used to work at this quaint little donut shop in the heart of the city. You know the kind, with a neon sign out front and the smell of fresh pastries wafting through the air. It had these big glass cases filled with all sorts of delicious treats, from glazed donuts to jelly-filled ones. There were also these old-fashioned booths with red vinyl seats and a jukebox in the corner. It was the kind of place where you could sit and enjoy a cup of coffee and a donut, and just watch the world go by. I was just a college student working part-time to make ends meet, and I didn't mind the job too much. The customers were mostly regulars, people who would come in every morning for their coffee and donut fix. There was this one guy, an older gentleman, who would always sit in the same booth and read the newspaper. He was friendly enough, I suppose, but there was also something about him that made me feel uneasy. One day, as I was wiping down the counter, I noticed that the old man was looking at me. He had this strange look in his eyes, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. I tried to ignore him and went about my work, but I could feel his eyes on me the whole time. As the days went by, the old man's behavior became more and more strange. He would sit in his booth for hours, just staring at me. I tried to tell myself that I was being paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. One day, as I was closing up the shop, I noticed that the old man was still there. He was sitting in his booth, just staring at me. I tried to ignore him and continue to clean up, but I could feel his eyes on me the whole time. As I was about to leave, I heard a noise behind me. I turned around to see the old man standing there, a strange smile on his face. Then I saw the knife in his hand. I could see the glint of the blade in the light. I was frozen with fear, unable to speak or move. The old man took a step towards me, and I knew that I was in trouble. I tried to run, but he grabbed me and pulled me back. I could feel the cold steel of the knife against my skin, and I knew that this was the end. But then, out of nowhere, the old man let go of me and fell to the ground. I looked up to see the owner of the shop, a big burly man named Joe, standing over him. Joe had hit the old man with a baseball bat, knocking him out cold. I was shaken, but I was alive. Joe helped me up and called the police, who came and took the old man away. I never found out what his intentions were, or why he had targeted me. But I knew one thing for sure. I would never forget that night, and I would always be grateful to Joe for saving my life. After that night, I quit my job at the donut shop. I couldn't bear to be there anymore, not after what had happened. I ended up moving to a different part of the city and found a new job. but I would never forget the old man, or the fear that he had instilled into me. My name is Emily, and I've always had a passion for baking. Ever since I was a little girl, I dreamed of opening my own bakery. So when I finally saved enough money, I took the plunge and opened Emily's Donuts in my hometown. The first few weeks were a whirlwind of excitement and exhaustion. I was baking donuts around the clock, trying to keep up with demand. But as the weeks went by, I started to notice strange things happening in my shop. At first it was just the little things, a missing tray of donuts here, a misplaced rolling pin there. I chalked it up to my own forgetfulness, but then the noises started. Late at night, when I was alone in the shop, I would hear the sound of footsteps upstairs. I lived in an apartment above the shop, and at first I thought it was just the old building settling. But then I started hearing whispers, faint voices that seemed to come from nowhere. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just my imagination, but then the accidents started happening. Dough would mysteriously fall off the counter, and once I even tripped over something that wasn't there. I was starting to get scared, but I couldn't afford to close the shop. I had poured my heart and soul into this place, not to mention my life savings, and I wasn't going to let some strange occurrences scare me away. But then one night, as I was closing up, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a figure moving in the shadows. It was a woman, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, with a look of sadness on her face. I screamed and ran out of the shop, locking the doors behind me. I didn't know what to do, so I called my friend Sarah, who had always been interested in the paranormal. Sarah came over the next day, and we searched the shop for any signs of the woman. We found nothing, but Sarah suggested that the woman might be a ghost, haunting the shop. I was skeptical at first, but then Sarah told me about the history of the building. It had once been a bakery, run by a woman named Clara. Clara had actually died in a fire in the shop, and her body had never been found. Hearing this, I was completely terrified, but Sarah convinced me to try to communicate with Clara. So we set up a Ouija board in the shop, and to my surprise, the planchette started moving. Through it, Clara told us that she was trapped in the shop, unable to move on because of her tragic death. She had been trying to get my attention, hoping that I could help her find peace. Needless to say, I was shaken, but I knew what I had to do. I contacted a medium, and together we performed a ritual to help Clara's spirit move on. After that, the strange occurrences stopped. The shop was once again filled with the sweet smell of donuts, and I felt at peace. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear the faint sound of footsteps upstairs. And I can't help but wonder if Clara's spirit is still watching over me, keeping me company in the shop that we both love.